Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about all of the books I read not only in July but also in June. So I didn't post a wrap up in June because honestly I only finished 2 books. I have been the DNF queen lately. I have been a DNF girly and I have been DNFing literally everything. So total I have 10 books to talk about, which I felt like is good enough, but I felt like I wasn't gonna make a video just for 2 books. Both June and July were both fairly average reading months for me. I have a lot of 3 stars on this list. So we're gonna talk about all of the 3 stars first, and then we'll talk about my 4 stars, because that's all I had in June and July. 3 and 4 stars. So first we have This Might Hurt by Stephanie Roble, and this is the only book that I finished for my reading vlog in June, reading the lowest rated books on my TBR. About a woman whose sister tells her she's going to this like wilderness therapy retreat center and she won't be contacted for a few months, and the sister gets worried when she goes multiple months without hearing from her sister. So she goes to find her sister and she learns there's more than just meets the eye going on at this retreat center. It had some other subplots going on that honestly were better than the main storyline, but overall it was just a very average book. I didn't dislike it, but there wasn't anything that I thought was like incredible about it. So definitely go watch that vlog to see me read this book and DNF like 4 others. Next, I read Everyone is Watching by Heather Gutenkopf, and I read this for the Sleep When I'm Dead book club hosted by my friend Jessie from the channel Reading with Jess. And this one is a thriller about a bunch of people that are on this game show to win a bunch of money, and things go awry and it's not what it seems and there's secrets, and it just kind of goes from there. And again, very average book. I didn't dislike it, but there was nothing that I felt like it added to that trope that hasn't been done before. I also feel like we have this influx recently of these competition style thrillers, and so I don't know, maybe it's just because I've read a lot of them recently and I have more to read still on my shelf. But I'll link the live show down below, so definitely go listen to their discussion if you've read it. So those are the only 2 books that I finished in June, and now let's jump into July's 3-star reads. First being Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. I did get this signed by Riley Sager when I met him at a book event, so that was kind of fun. And so I definitely have great memories of this book. I did a mini vlog of going to the author event, so definitely check this out. But I also read this for the Sleep When I'm Dead book club for July, and so me and the Fab Five discussed this just last week on Jessie's channel, and I'll also link that discussion. But we all felt very meh about this. I didn't dislike it. It's like a warm hug. It's Riley Sager. It's familiar. It's easy to get through. I didn't have a problem listening to it. I wasn't feeling like I was bored or anything, but it didn't add anything new to the mystery thriller genre. This is about Ethan, who when he was 10 years old, he and his friend Billy were camping in their backyard and Billy disappeared in the middle of the night. No one ever found him. Now he's an adult back in the cul-de-sac where he grew up, and he's trying to figure out what happened to Billy. I definitely see what Riley Sager was trying to do, and I don't think that Riley Sager can write a bad book. This one just felt very average, and it kind of took some things from other thrillers or TV shows and things that I just felt like it didn't feel like anything new. So definitely go listen to that discussion for all of our in-depth thoughts on this. Next book I want to talk about is Stolen Innocence by Elisa Wall, and this is a memoir about a woman who grew up in a polygamous cult. And it's just about her life, and it's her story about being married off to, I believe it was her uncle, at the age of like 14. And you can definitely tell that she wrote this herself because it just felt a little bit disjointed, and I felt like we kind of popped around her life a little bit. And there were certain things that I felt like were big things that added to the story and her life, and big elements that she kind of glazed over. But then she went into really big, large descriptions about other things that I felt like were very menial in the grand scheme of things. So I don't know, it's just an average memoir. I also feel like I've read so many polygamy memoirs at this point that they all are starting to seem like the same thing. This one was also very long, so if you were going to read a polygamy memoir for the first time, I wouldn't recommend this one. But if you want to know my recommendation, let me know in the comments and I'm happy to share my favorites. Next, I read Paradise Problem by Christina Lauren, and I read this for Jessie's membership on her YouTube channel. So her Sleep When I'm Dead book club is totally free. You just read the book and discuss with people. There's also a Discord, but her Pop Print Pals is her paid membership associated with her YouTube channel. So that's why I read this one, but I do enjoy Christina Lauren. They're nice romances. They're not too smutty, but they have a little bit of spice. They're rom-coms, but they also have some harder hitting topics as well. They're just all around decent romances, and I think I've only disliked one of them, and that was My Favorite Half Night Stand. But this, again, like most of the books I read the past 2 months, just felt very average. It also didn't feel very believable. It felt like a soap opera and a sitcom put together, and it just wasn't believable enough for me. You have two people who are married, but marriage for convenience so that they could get better housing in college, but then also so the guy can get his inheritance because he has this grandfather that's really rich and he's really rich.
And his father's trying to get him to be part of this big company, and so he needs to convince everybody that they're actually married so they can still get his inheritance and not have to work for his dad. And she needs money for her dad's chemo, and then he's going on this vacation because he needs to keep up this facade.
And so they end up going to this wedding together and pretending like they're married, and it just felt like very chaotic. And as we know, Lena doesn't like rich people drama. So if you were wanting to read Christina Lauren for the first time, this would not be the one I would recommend. But once again, if you want to know which one I would recommend, leave me a comment and I can let you know. And then the last 3-star book I read was Delicate Condition by Danielle Valentine. And I read this because I will be reading another Danielle Valentine book this month in August, but it's a YA thriller. This was a psychological suspense about a woman who is going through IVF, and she starts noticing weird things happening to her body. And then she has a miscarriage and she's convinced that she's still pregnant, and nobody's believing her, but there's all these really weird, bizarre, horrific things happening to her body, and she can't get anybody to believe her or help her figure out what's going on. And I've been told that the most recent American Horror Story season was based on this. I haven't seen it yet, but I feel like it would probably be really good as an American Horror Story season, because I felt like the horror elements in this I just didn't really attach to because I'm not really a horror reader. You definitely have to suspend your disbelief for this one, but it had a decent ending, and it wasn't phenomenal, but it wasn't a bad book by any means. Again, just kind of average, but it kept me guessing. It was a quick read. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and I don't really have anything bad to say about it. So if you like some light horror, I think this would be perfect. This was enough horror for me. Any more and I would have been out. The last 3-star read that I'm going to talk about is Night Watch by Jane Ann Phillips, and I read this for my Reading Asylum and Institution vlogs, and again, very average. It's fictional characters that were at a real place. So the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum in Weston, West Virginia is a real place. It was a real asylum. There's a lot of history behind it. I've been there, I've visited it, I know all of the history, so I was excited to read a fictional book about a real place that I've been. But there was too many POVs that didn't really all collaborate well at the end, and it was just a little bit messy, and it's set at the time when the asylum had just opened and it wasn't overrun. There wasn't horrific things happening. There weren't lobotomies. It was actually a good place for you to send the mentally ill. So it was interesting to see that side of things, because the history doesn't really talk about that. It talks about being overrun and all of the laws and the lobotomies and everything. Honestly, that's the part that's interesting. That's the part I was hoping this book would be about, but instead it was about a woman who was there with her daughter, but they were pretending like she wasn't her daughter so that she could stay with her and be like her lady's maid. And it's just about her trying to help her mom become mentally stable again and be able to leave the asylum. And it just was a slice of life story, I guess. And so it was just, again, average. Those were all of my 3-star books, and now let's talk about 4-star books. First being the other book that I read for that asylum reading vlog, and that was Silence for the Dead by Simone St. James. And this is about a woman who poses as a nurse and gets a job as a nurse at Portis House, which is an institution for men with PTSD. And before it was an institution, a family lived there and they disappeared. So not only is she navigating being a very fake nurse in a very real place, treating people, but she also is trying to figure out what happened to the family that lived there before, and they also think that Portis House is haunted. I love Simone St. James. I didn't think that I would love her historical fiction, but I love it just as much as her current day thrillers and her more recent releases, so I'm enjoying going through all of her backlist. And then the next books I'm going to talk about were all books that I read for my vlog reading Jackie's least favorite books, and I ended up giving them all 4 stars. The first is Drowning Woman by Robin Harding, and this is about a woman who's homeless, living in her car, and she sees a very rich woman go into the water and try to drown herself. She ends up saving her, and then they get enmeshed in each other's lives, and it gets a little messy. It's a pretty good domestic thriller. It was a slow burn. I enjoy Robin Harding's writing. She does a really great job with domestic suspense, but I didn't give it 5 stars just because it didn't wow me. Then I read Humble Pie by Gordon Ramsay, and this is his autobiography, and it was just so fun. I enjoyed getting to hear him tell his story. I loved learning more about the restaurant industry. I liked hearing about the beginning of his career, meeting his wife, his children being little. It was just a really, really good time. And then the last book I read for that vlog was He Started It by Samantha Downing. And this is about siblings who go on a road trip to get their inheritance because their grandfather said, if you want your inheritance, you got to go on the same road trip that we went on when you all were kids. So together with their spouses, they're retracing their footsteps on this road trip, and things get really messy. And people have loved this ending and hated this ending. I'm one who loved it, so it worked for me. I just really enjoyed this book. I like Samantha Downing. This might be my favorite one, actually. All right, that's all 10 books that I read in June and July. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what did you think about them. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.